How long is 1,260 days in biblical prophecy? 1,260 years. We gave you the starting point for when the beast really turned into a beast and began to persecute and use civil military power. 538 AD. It's a very easily well-established date in history. If you go 1,260 years, you come to where? 1798. Wonder what's going on then. What happens to the beast after 42 months? You can read in Revelation 13, it says, I saw one of his heads as it was wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. It at least receives a deadly wound. Its power is interrupted. Instead of it having such a great control and influence and being, it wasn't just a religious power, it was a civil power over all of Europe and even parts beyond. It started to reach into South America at that point too, and Central America. It would be wounded. It would lose some of that power. What does history tell us happened? In 1798, anyone ever heard of Napoleon Bonaparte? He was sweeping across Europe. It was not a religious movement. It was a very secular movement. He sent his general, Berthier, into Rome, and through his entrance in Rome, he abolished the papal government and established a secular one. They received a deadly wound. The Bible says in Revelation 13:10, he that leads into captivity will go into captivity, and he that kills with the sword will be killed with the sword. And the tables were sort of turned. Instead of the Inquisition and them having so much power to torture and force people to convert, and there's a persecution against the Protestants, the Pope was carried off into Valence, France, to a fortress city, and he died in prison there. And for over 130 years, they lost their civil power. But it said it would be temporary. It said the deadly wound would be healed, and all the world would wonder. You look in history, and in 1929, there was a fellow named Benito Mussolini. Anyone remember? You know, I'm getting old. Some of you remember World War II, not too many left anymore. Mussolini, he made a deal with the Pope. He said, look, I need you to endorse me politically. If you agree to endorse me politically so that my station will grow, we will again give you your independence as a country for the Vatican. We will make you once again a civil power as well as religious so that you can send your ambassadors around the world. And so they signed the Lateran Pact. And they again began to exercise their power. And it says, I forgot to read what was on the screen. The Roman question tonight was a thing of the past, and the Vatican was at peace with Italy. It says, in affixing autographs to the memorable document, healing the wound. Even using the very same wording. And as you look at what's going on in the world today, would you say that they've returned to not just European, but international prominence as a power? Just this week, I saw in the paper that they did a poll, and they came to the conclusion that the Pope is the most popular world figure right now. He's got the highest rating. If he ran for president in the U.S., he'd probably get elected, even though he wasn't born here. The papacy has gained worldwide influence, prestige, and prominence. Some very interesting things have happened in the religious arena and even within the Catholic Church in the last couple of years. You know, I thought it was amazing that the very same day that Pope Benedict announced that he was resigning, lightning struck the Vatican and a photographer got the picture. This is actually a photograph. I don't know if there's any significance to that, but I thought it was coincidental, if nothing else. First time in 500 years that a living, somewhat healthy Pope still had his wits about him, retired. And it almost looked like something had been orchestrated. And there was something else going on behind the scene. Of course, the Vatican had lost a lot of influence. It was rocked by several scandals. There was an unsolved mystery, a murder in the Vatican, financial questions. And so for the first time then, they also chose a pope from a different part of the planet. Used to be they were always Italian. John Paul II was the first Polish pope. And now they got one from the Americas who spoke Spanish as well as Latin and Italian. First Jesuit pope. And do you understand why the Jesuits were formed? Founded by Ignatius of Loyola in 1534, their supreme purpose was in the organization of the Jesuits. Now, I realize there's a lot of good things that are happening with education among the Jesuits, and a lot of that has maybe simmered down as far as the public is concerned, but the reason they were formed is because they were to fight against the Protestant Reformation. That was the purpose that they were organized. They were especially established in 1540 with the purpose to overthrow the faith of the Protestants. And it was basically a secret army. I don't know if you're aware that when the United States was formed, people were terrified of anybody from the Catholic Church coming. Catholics were actually persecuted in North America because the Protestants that fled here for religious freedom were afraid that they were going to bring the persecution of Europe to our country. Now, of course, none of you are old enough to remember that, but if you know your history, you'll remember that.